A warm June afternoon in the rolling hills of Beech Creek, Tennessee. The sound of cicadas in the woods. A quiet rural road and a family home perched high on a ridge. On June 15, 2021, 5-year-old Summer Moon Utah Wells vanished from that hillside, gone in moments, leaving behind her toys, her brothers, and a community shaken to its core. From that day forward, searchers scoured the dense hollows, helicopters traced the skies, and more than 1,000 tips poured into law enforcement. Yet, despite the largest manhunt this region had ever seen, the answers never came. For years, the Wells family, their neighbors, and people across the country have carried the same burning questions. Where is Summer? Who knows what happened? And why has the truth remained so far out of reach? Recently, something shifted. After years of painful silence and unanswered leads, a voice emerged. An eyewitness, someone who says they were in the area on the day Summer disappeared, has stepped forward to speak directly with investigators. They claim they saw and heard things that could matter. Their account, now in the hands of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, offers details that demand our attention. Who is this person? What exactly did they tell the TBI? And how does their statement fit into the timeline and the mystery that has gripped so many for so long? Today, we're going to break down everything known about this witness, explore the facts behind their testimony, and look closely at how authorities responded and what it could mean for Summer's case. I'm Agent Tim. My mission is to follow the evidence, to ask the hard questions, and to bring you the truth without fear or favor. If you care about justice for Summer Wells and other missing children, don't just watch from the sidelines. Hit that subscribe button right now. Join a community that refuses to let this little girl's story fade into the shadows. Together, we can make sure the light keeps shining until the whole truth comes out. To understand the weight of this eyewitness account, we have to step back into that pivotal day, June 15th, 2021. It wasn't just another summer afternoon in rural Hawkins County. It was the moment a quiet Appalachian community was thrust into a mystery that still echoes to this day. Summer Wells was playing outside her home on Ben Hill Road. It's a remote, wooded ridge with steep paths, outbuildings, and thick brush surrounding the Wells family's property. According to official timelines, she had just returned from a day running errands with her mother and grandmother. Then, within a narrow window of time, Summer was reported missing. Authorities were called around 6:30 p.m. In those first frantic hours, neighbors searched, deputies arrived, and the scene became the center of what would grow into one of the largest search operations in Tennessee's history. But for all the drones, K-9 units, helicopters, and law enforcement boots on the ground, one thing has remained elusive: a clear, undisputed account of what happened in those critical moments. This is why the words of any credible witness, someone who claims to have been nearby that day, matters so much. They could help piece together a timeline that's been missing vital fragments for years. And now, an individual has come forward. According to publicly available reports and information shared directly with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, this eyewitness describes something they saw and heard that afternoon that they believe investigators need to hear. Was it movement on the property? A sound that stood out in the otherwise still woods? A vehicle or person they didn't recognize? The specifics of their account haven't all been disclosed to the public, but the fact that the TBI listened tells us it was serious enough to document and consider. For the Wells family and for all of us following this case, any legitimate lead feels monumental. Because for over 3 years, this case has been shrouded in silence and heartbreak. And if this witness is credible, it could help answer questions that have haunted Summer's family and investigators since that day. Before we dive into the details of what's known about this person and the TBI's response, I need you to pause and think. How many missing children remain voiceless because no one speaks up?
Don't let this story fade like so many others. If you believe that every lead counts and justice matters, subscribe to this channel right now. It's free, but it helps ensure stories like Summer's stay in the public eye.
When an eyewitness steps forward years after a child goes missing, the first question is always, why now? In this case, the individual who approached the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation wasn't some distant bystander or internet sleuth. Based on verified reports and credible discussions surrounding the case, they were someone familiar with the Beech Creek area, someone who had reason to be on or near Ben Hill Road on the afternoon Summer vanished. According to what's been publicly shared, this witness claimed to have seen and heard things that stood out as unusual. They allegedly described noticing a vehicle in the area around the time Summer was last seen, a vehicle they didn't recognize. They also recalled hearing sounds coming from the property that didn't fit the quiet rural atmosphere. While we don't have every detail of what was said to investigators, what makes this significant is how seriously the TBI took their statement. Law enforcement reportedly interviewed this person, documented their testimony, and compared it against the known timeline of events. Why does that matter? Because law enforcement receives hundreds of tips in cases like this. Many go nowhere. But when the TBI gives time and attention to a statement, it means the information has at least some potential value. Even if it doesn't solve the case outright, it can rule out or validate parts of the timeline, and that is critical in any missing person investigation. This witness also indicated that their hesitation to come forward earlier wasn't out of neglect, but fear. Fear of being dismissed, fear of backlash, and fear of becoming entangled in a case that has already divided a community. For anyone who's been following the story, you know how intense the emotions are on all sides. But finally, after years of silence, they spoke. And they spoke directly to law enforcement. The key takeaway is this: credible witnesses are rare, especially after so much time has passed. If what this person saw and heard checks out, it could be one of the most important pieces of information in Summer's case to date, and that's why we need to pay close attention to what comes next. When the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation receives a tip, especially years after the initial incident, they don't simply file it away and forget. They evaluate, cross-reference, and determine whether it could reshape or reinforce the timeline. In this case, credible reports suggest the TBI didn't dismiss the witness. Instead, agents listened, documented their account, and took steps to compare it with existing evidence. That tells us something very important. Even after years, investigators believe the case is far from cold. Why does this matter? Because law enforcement operates on facts. Every sound this witness claimed to hear, every unfamiliar vehicle they reported seeing, and every detail about the timing had to be weighed against physical searches, phone records, and prior witness statements. That's what makes this development different from online speculation. This went directly to the professionals tasked with finding Summer Wells. It's also a powerful reminder that even years later, one observation can become the missing piece. Think about it. Major breakthroughs in similar cases have often come from someone finally speaking up. And if that's true here, it could help investigators zero in on areas of interest they may have overlooked or dismissed. But let me ask you this. How many people out there have seen something, heard something, or know something but stay silent? If we care about bringing truth and justice for Summer, we can't look away. That's why we dig deeper, and that's why I need your help. Subscribe now, not for me, but so that stories like Summer's don't vanish into silence. Every time you share and engage, it keeps the spotlight on her case and pushes for answers. The TBI's response to this witness is an encouraging sign. They've remained tight-lipped publicly, but their actions show the investigation is still active. That means there's still hope and still reason to ask hard questions about what really happened that day on Ben Hill Road. For years, the timeline of June 15th, 2021 has been at the center of everything. We know what the family claims. Summer was reportedly last seen in or around her home in the Beech Creek community near Ben Hill Road in the early evening.
According to official statements, her mother said she walked her back into the house after gardening outside, and just minutes later, she was gone. That's the narrative we've all heard. But timelines are rarely that simple, and this is where the eyewitness account becomes critical. From what we've gathered, this witness described events happening within that same crucial window, the late afternoon to early evening timeframe. Their account referenced activity and sounds near the Wells property that didn't align with the usual quiet rural atmosphere. More importantly, they claimed to notice a vehicle they didn't recognize in the area. Now, think about this carefully. If this statement checks out, it could mean there was someone near the property at the very time Summer disappeared, someone outside of the immediate family. That alone is a bombshell detail, and you can see why the TBI paid attention. But there's more to consider. The official timeline has always faced scrutiny, not because we want to doubt anyone unfairly, but because clarity brings truth. Was Summer truly last seen when her family says she was? Did someone else see her later? Or was there an opportunity for her to have left or been taken before that? The witness's statement forces investigators to re-examine these gaps. Every minute counts, and every sighting or sound matters. And this is where we, as a community following this case, must ask the hard questions. If this witness heard and saw something, why wasn't it noticed before? Was it fear that delayed their statement? Was it because they didn't realize its significance until later? Or does it suggest there are other witnesses out there who still haven't spoken up? These aren't just idle questions. They strike at the heart of justice for Summer. If even one detail of the timeline is off, it changes the scope of the investigation entirely. It could validate the theory of an abduction, or it could highlight an inside job. We can't jump to conclusions, but we also can't ignore the implications. That's why cases like this demand relentless digging, and why eyewitness accounts, even years later, matter so much. For those watching, this is where we need you most. Stay engaged, share these updates, and keep asking questions. Because when people stop asking, cases like Summer's go cold, and that can't happen. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment to hit that button. Not just to support me as Agent Tim bringing you facts and evidence, but to stand for truth and make sure this little girl's name is never forgotten.
When an investigation drags on for years without resolution, one detail, just one new piece of information, can be the difference between a cold file and a breakthrough. And that's what makes this witness's account so significant. It doesn't exist in isolation. It connects with questions that have lingered since day one and theories that law enforcement has quietly wrestled with. For nearly 4 years, two primary narratives have dominated the Summer Wells case. The first, that she somehow wandered off on her own into the rugged Tennessee hills. Search crews spent months combing those woods, using dogs, drones, even specialized teams trained to detect the faintest trace of a human scent. And yet, nothing. No shoes, no clothing, no remains. That's led many to question whether an abduction or foul play was more likely. The second theory, the one nobody likes to talk about but can't ignore, is that someone close to her knows more than they've said. It's painful, but statistics on missing children force us to consider it. This is where the witness comes in. According to their statement, relayed to investigators and corroborated in part by what others in the area noticed, there may have been a vehicle or person near the Wells property that didn't belong there that day. If this detail checks out, it breathes new life into the possibility of an outside perpetrator. Maybe someone was watching, waiting for a window of opportunity, or even knew the family's routine. On the other hand, if investigators find inconsistencies between the witness account and the known facts, it could point back to those closest to Summer. Either way, it's pivotal information, and TVI can't afford to ignore it. Behind the scenes, this kind of tip triggers serious action. Investigators cross-reference cell phone pings, re-interview neighbors, compare notes with federal partners like the FBI. They may even quietly revisit old search areas or surveillance footage if anything exists from that time frame. And let's be clear, even if this witness only came forward recently, law enforcement treats credible statements with the same weight whether they arrive hours or years later.
For us watching, this means we have to stay engaged and patient. Justice in cases like this doesn't always move in a straight line. It can take one person's courage to speak up, one investigator's determination to follow a lead, to finally piece the puzzle together. And if you're listening to this and you know something, no matter how small it seems, remember that silence helps no one. It's never too late to tell the truth. Friends, if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Not for me, but because every share, every comment keeps Summer's name alive and reminds the world she matters. The more we keep the pressure on for answers, the harder it is for this case to be forgotten. And you and I both know she deserves more than that.
Now that we understand why this eyewitness testimony is such a turning point, we need to ask the question that's on everyone's mind. What happens next? What could this mean for the investigation, and most importantly, for Summer Wells and her family? When a new witness comes forward, it's not just a note added to a case file. It can trigger a chain reaction. TBI and FBI agents might quietly reopen certain investigative threads, rechecking phone records, pulling archived surveillance data from the area, and contacting potential witnesses again. Why? Because memory is tricky and corroboration is everything. Investigators will want to see if this account lines up with what others remember, or if it raises inconsistencies that demand further explanation. Could this testimony finally pinpoint whether an abduction happened? Maybe. Could it identify someone who had gone unnoticed all this time? It's possible, but as encouraging as that sounds, there's a sobering reality here. Leads can take time, and they don't always result in immediate answers. That's why cases like Summer's need more than just police effort. They need constant public awareness. We've seen it before. Cases that went cold for years have cracked wide open because someone refused to stop talking, refused to stop sharing, refused to let the name of a missing child fade into obscurity. This is where you come in. If you've been watching silently, ask yourself, why not be a voice? Why not help keep the momentum alive? If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment. Not for clicks or views, but because every time you engage with content like this, you send a message. Summer's story matters. It matters to you, to this community, and it should matter to the world. Don't wait until another year passes with no answers. Hit that button, leave a comment, share this video. Your small action can create ripples that reach further than you imagine. Meanwhile, law enforcement will keep doing their work, often away from the cameras, in silence. But silence doesn't mean inactivity. It means persistence, long hours, and the kind of meticulous follow-up that rarely make headlines. That's why we need to keep talking, because attention fuels accountability, and accountability fuels justice. As we close, take a moment and picture Summer Moon Utah Wells not as a headline, but as the little girl she truly is. A child with bright eyes, a future full of dreams, a destiny that never should have been stolen or delayed. Summer had the right to grow up, to laugh, to learn, to live. Justice for Summer is not just a slogan, it's a responsibility. This case can't stay in the shadows. If you know anything, no matter how small or insignificant it seems, speak up. Silence helps no one. One voice, one tip, one memory could be the missing piece that finally brings clarity and closure. And to all of you watching, you are part of this. Justice isn't handed down by strangers. It's built by communities that refuse to forget. Summer deserves that. Every missing child deserves that. We are committed here to shining a light on every dark corner of this story and others like it. That's why I ask you, if you haven't yet, subscribe now. Not for me, but to stand for truth with evidence to ensure we don't stop until the last question is answered. Share this video so her name doesn't fade. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. Your voices from across the world matter. Together, we show that Summer's life matters far beyond Beech Creek, Tennessee. We remain committed. I'm Agent Tim, and we won't stop investigating. We won't stop speaking until there's justice for Summer Wells.